and conferences in media and other forums on diverse subjects. So before handing over the platform to today's speaker, let me tell the audience that we have started this SOAFAL lecture on February 2021. Until now, we have completed 53 lectures. Earlier, the lectures were on random topics. So this third annual series of lectures is based upon a single theme, annual theme, that is integrated maritime studies. And I must mention here that Commodore Saab is one of our mentor guide in selecting in guiding our routes, because when he was there in the Dhara conference, which was organized in Odisha State Maritime Museum under a Ministry of Culture and Ministry of Education joint sponsorship, from 8th November to 10th November, he was very gracious enough in coming as a speaker. And I am very happy that with the blessings of all these great great persons in the Navy, in the field of Navy, we will be definitely concluding this year's 25 lectures, finally, which will be compiled into a book, which will have a library value also, and that will also pay in the establishment of a center of excellence in integrated maritime studies in the university. With these words, also let me mention here that because today is World Earth Day and the Vice Chancellor has to leave for a urgent plantation, so he will not be available. So I beg apology before the speaker and the audience, though I have promised that the Vice Chancellor will be there to address the gathering briefly. He is not available. So with these words, again, I invite you, sir, to kindly deliver the 54th overall SOAFAL oration. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Professor Sir. I hope you can hear me and see me. What
Yes,
I will
sir.
do,
Yes, sir. Yes.
what I will do first is to share my presentation, and once we're comfortable with that, then I will begin my talk. Thanks. Can you see the first slide, sir?
Yes, please.
And I'm rolling it down once. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you very much, Professor Sarma, for your very kind introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A great honor to be with all of you here for this talk. And I should hope that we are able to get some little idea of how the Navy has transformed over the last 75 years in my 45-50 minutes of talk. But I welcome lots of questions, critiques, just about any feedback that you would like to give after the talk. And in fact, we look forward to some active discussions after my talk so that we are all better informed about the role of the Navy and what it has done over the last 75 years. As they say, I'm happy this is the 54th talk. They say that a deck of cards is full only when it has 54. I hope that the last two are jokers, so I am not one of those jokers who's now completing the pack. But if it be, so it be. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have very slightly tweaked. There is no change in the content, but I thought that calling it India's Navy, Indian Navy, would be a very good way to illustrate what I'm trying to say about our transformation to a blue water force. And that's because today, in particular, 22nd April, in 1958 is when the first, it's an important day for the Navy, was when Admiral R.D. Katari took over as the first Indian Chief of Naval Staff. For the Navy, it was a little after the Army and the Air Force, so today is a big day for us. And over a period of time, how the Navy has come to be not merely India's Navy, but also Indian Navy is what I seek to present to all of you today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, frequently when I do my classes in a live talk, I flash this and tell the audience, I say, can you recognize any of these people? Usually it is preceded by a photograph of a film actor or a cricketer. I have no disrespect towards any of them, but and then show these four people, and usually, no matter how enlightened the audience, almost nine, if it is a non-Navy one, almost 90-95% of them are not able to recognize these four people. And it's not their fault. The problem is that in India, maritime awareness or awareness about our Navy is not too high, and there are a variety of reasons about that. So, but I thought that these four people in some way represent the best of the Navy's transformation. So let me begin anecdotally with the stories of these four. The gentleman on the top left-hand corner is Commander Satyabrata Dam, the one with the mountains behind him. He is probably the only person in the world who has climbed the Mount Everest three times and done the North Pole and the South Pole, dived in on the oceans of the world, climbed the highest peaks of all the continents. In fact, one of his Everest expeditions began 150 meters below the sea. So technically, they did more height than 8848, which is the height of Everest. And he is, other than that, he was a Navy or a services badminton player, a good writer. But how many of us have heard of him? Take the man diagonally across, the bald person with a beard, Dilip Donde. Some of you may have heard this name. Dilip Donde was the first Indian to solo circumnavigate the world. Solo means he went alone on a small ship, a small yacht. Circumnavigate, go all around the world. What else did he do? He sailed. That means he did not use engines or motors for propulsion. It was only sails like the olden days. Now, you can't get a bigger national hero than that, right? The man to his left, I will tell you his story in a bit. Abhilash Tommy, Commander Abhilash Tommy, was Dilip Donde's student. The Chela went one over the Guru, while Dilip Donde stopped at some places en route. Abhilash Tommy in the year 2012-13 did a non-stop solo circumnavigation. That means the only person on a sailboat using nothing but wind power or and going all over the world. He sailed for 151 days. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the club of solo circumnavigators is lesser than the number of people in outer space or those who have climbed Mount Everest. And India has these two gentlemen plus six ladies, eight people in that club. Remarkable, isn't it? And what Abhilash Tommy is doing now, and ladies and gentlemen, I thought I must tell this to you. He not only did solo circumnavigation in 2013, he attempted one more in a solo circumnavigation race in 2018. It's the toughest race around the world called the Golden Globe Race. In 2018, when he was in the third position, similar conditions, they had to say, I have written an article on this. In southern Indian Ocean, he faced very terrible rough seas. He was dismasted, his ship, his little boat almost sank. For 72 hours, he waited alone with a broken backbone, awaiting rescue till he was finally rescued. What does the gentleman do? He comes back, he has five, of his bones broken, they're fused, he gets titanium rods inserted, goes back to sailing the Golden Globe race in 2022. And as we speak today, ladies and gentlemen, there are just 3 people left in this race, which started in September last year. 16 people, only 3 people left, and Tommy is in the second position, narrowly behind the first and may come first. It is perhaps India's greatest sporting achievement, and I dare say bigger than IPL, bigger than anything else. My own opinion, but that's I dare say it's the biggest sporting achievement that India has. None of us know about Virat Kohli. All these, ladies and gentlemen, are Indian Navy officers, retired now, all of them. The gentleman on top, a top-notch fighter pilot, Jaideep Molankar, who landed the LCA, India's fighter aircraft, for the first time on India's aircraft carrier. Now, I'm not going to detail about why aviation, naval aviation or aviation at sea is 1,000 times more complex than aviation on land. But his achievement is almost Neil Armstrong kind. You know, it was an Indian fighter plane that was being tested for the first time, and he landed that on the aircraft carrier. My point, ladies and gentlemen, is this, that unless we know our heroes, we can't imagine our names. And it is through these people that we come to know what the Navy has done. But before that, it is also important for us to know how do we think of our Navy. And I wanted to show you 2 tweets on the 12th of October last year, 12th, 13th October, which sort of talks of the US Navy, greeting the US Navy on its birthday. And look at what one person says: the largest increase in global prosperity thanks to the US Navy. So you're not talking of defending countries or territorial integrity or defending coastline. The US Navy is seen by one tweeter as the one most responsible for global prosperity, another as the liberal world order is underwritten by CPA. Now, why I am telling you this, ladies and gentlemen, is because there is a different way, without any prejudice to the Army and Air Force, who are indeed, great services. Our siblings, our senior siblings, elder siblings, or bigger siblings, whatever. But the navies are different, and there is a reason. The reason is this: seas are essentially multilateral, meaning beyond 12 nautical miles, you're in international waters. Therefore, there is greater role for Navy diplomacy, with international law facets coming in, which does not obtain on land or in the air. Since more than 90% of world trade happens through the seas, the core role of navies, ladies and gentlemen, is protection of our sea routes, or what are called sea lines of communication. Therefore, navies have a huge role in economic security and in furthering our economy. And because now there are resources at sea, what we talk of as blue economy, protection of ease, and all that which involves the Navy and the Coast Guard, it is different out at sea. Also, the navies and the Coast Guard do constabulary, that means the policing role. Unlike on land, where for law and order and crime and everything else, you have different agencies, at sea, what is called good order is maintained by navies and Coast Guard. So, navies have a policing role. Most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, navies are interest based, not threat based. That means, for example, if you have interest in Antarctica, if you have interest in where your diaspora is all over the world, then your navies are meant for furthering, preserving, protecting, and promoting those interests. Also, therefore, navies can do a range of roles, from power projection on one side, ecological housekeeping at sea, science and technology and exploration. Please remember that, for example, Darwin's theory of evolution came through on his expeditions on HMS Beagle. So navies are different, and that is the parameter by which you must, regard your navy and see what has been the progress. Now, as Panditji said, if you want to put it in smaller, shorter, more pithy way, to be secure on land, we must be supreme at sea. So, therefore, to come back, what is it that the Indian Navy does? Ladies and gentlemen, defend our coast is just one of the many things we do. We defend our maritime interest, and not just defend, like I said, preserve, protect, and promote our maritime interests all over the world. We contribute to international peace in several ways. For example, we were a part of the global force against in counter piracy operations in the Gulf of Eden. We are preferred security partner or provider and first responder to several issues in the Indian Ocean region. Like I said, we contribute very directly to economy, to ecology, to science and technology. We contribute to safe seas, and therefore, I argue that we are a force for good, and that is how you must see the navies. But what has happened in our own history, as the great Sardar Panikkar said in this very slim book, India and the Indian Ocean, in 1945, he said many landsmen thought of the seas only as a frontier, not as vital territorial areas. And the history of India has been determined not on land frontiers, but on the oceanic expanse that washes the three sides. Of course, remember we were colonized by people who came from the sea.
Sir, there is just a little amount of interruption.
Yeah.
On this slide, this hide is sharing is coming. Please click on that so that that part will be removed. Hmm. Hide sharing. This one, this one.
This better?
Yes. Now it has gone down. Okay.
Yeah,
Please
yeah,
continue.
yeah. Okay. So, as Panikkar said, we uh, must, or if I were to put it in a very small way, what is the lesson of history? Remember, you will always have a navy at your post. If it is not yours, it will be somebody else's. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want someone to ask me a question regarding this, because um, one is to take this meaning, but there is another implied meaning in this which I'd like to touch upon during the Q&A. So I hope someone will remind me of that. So essentially, remember this, that there is a need to have a navy, and it is in the way that you imagine what your maritime interests are and you define it, is the way that you can define the roles for navies. Now, what are the governing considerations? Ladies and gentlemen, all countries have armies because, sovereignty and core territorial integrity is very precious to everyone. It takes a certain amount of progress to have a navy. It takes a certain amount of, let's say, further graduation up your interest scale in determination of that makes you want or have a navy. But some of the considerations are geography. Obviously, if you have many islands, vast coastline, and all that, then you would want or have a navy. So India is blessed in that regard, and I don't need to tell you all that. Even if you don't know very many statistics, you know the map of India and how it is very maritime or peninsular in character. History, again, our history gives us two great vital lessons. Remember, we are the only country after whom an ocean is named. We're the only country in the world after whom an ocean is named, which tells us of our great historical antiquity and geographical sort of important position in the Indian Ocean region. So there is a glorious period of maritime history. There is also a recent history during the colonial period when sea blindness or turning our backs to the sea led to the colonials coming and conquering us. A lot depends on your political strategic outlook, how you look at international relations, how you determine what your role within the global framework should be. Economics, obviously, money tells you, and money will determine. I don't need to tell you that. And obviously, finally, other considerations. And in that other considerations, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most important one is what is the maritime outlook of the people? What is the maritime awareness of people? How much do they need or they see the need for a strong navy, good navy, and what is their maritime orientation? That is very, very important, right? So, what has the Indian Navy done? Ladies and gentlemen, very quickly to tell you, in 75 years, we were amongst, at the end of colonial period, we were amongst the smallest navies, less than or just about half a dozen sloops. About 1,000 tons is a sloop. tonnage, very small ships. From there, we have grown to become the largest, amongst the largest in the world, with massive all-round growth. We operate in all three dimensions, that means surface, subsurface, and air. We are a very, very formidable surface force. We have more than 50 years, 1968 onwards, operating submarines. We have been very good in naval aviation. Above all, ladies and gentlemen, we are pioneers in Atmanirbharta or making in India, and I'll tell you about that more. And I would argue that we have. That is why I put a question mark in the last, and you know counter if you wish. But I would argue that we have done mission accomplishment across spectrums of roles and operations over the last 75 years. And this, ladies and gentlemen, interestingly, has been amongst great degree of challenges and constraints. And it is not that anyone has to be blamed for that. Nations evolve in a particular way. But as I say, there is what we people at sea or what we people in the Navy call a sea blindness. There is a certain apathy or disregard or neglect of the sea amongst many of our elites and common people. And as I told you, ignorance or not knowing what Abhilash Tommy is doing at this point of time. Whereas when we every day we are, analyzing IPL 19 to dozen, but here we are not analyzing how is he sailing, what tactics he's using, and all and so forth. So there is a history of sea blindness. Our post-independence canvas, it just emerged after World War II. There was a naval uprising or naval mutiny, as it was called, which had a certain impact on Navy. There were lots of things about the post-independence canvas. At the same time, interestingly, much of our early leadership had taken part in World War II, so they were sort of trained in possibly the best training ground at that time. We also had what is called limited defense technology industry base and very limited funding. Ladies and gentlemen, the Navy's budget was extremely low. In fact, just after the Chinese War and all, it was less than 5%, 2%, 3% often. And at no point has it exceeded 20%. The highest it went was 18, 19%. Last year was about, I think, 16% of, I'm talking of defense budget. So Navy is a capital intensive service with limited funding. Our prevailing political and bureaucratic culture, and again, this is no blame, no illusion on anyone. These are the ways countries evolve, but it did not probably have too much time for issues at sea because we gave more importance to land and continental affairs. And rightly so, we had Kashmir, we had Junagadh, we had Hyderabad right after independence. So there were more important challenges on land. So our gaze turned away from the sea. But it is not that our political leaders did not know or did not think. I mean, look at this statement by Panditji. He sailed, in fact, on 1948, in 1950 on the INS Delhi. I'll talk about that in a bit. But look at his. He says that history has shown that whichever power controls the sea has India's seaboard trade at her mercy, and in the second, India's very independence. So yes, there was, let's say, awareness. Or look at this, very, very early on, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel on board the INS Delhi. The geographical position and features of India make it inevitable for India to have a strong navy. So this is another very, very interesting photograph, ladies and gentlemen. Babu Rajendra Prasad, he's sailing on INS Delhi. He's sailing to Andamans. First time we had a president visiting Andamans. And look at it, he's weaving the charkha on the deck, and there are these Navy officers watching him with some amount of curiosity. So it is what I call as meeting of two worlds. Here was a Navy that had been groomed in colonial tradition. It doesn't mean that they were colonial in their thinking. That's a misconception. But they were groomed in a certain tradition, and they were now coming to sort of interact much more with the political masters and see what they thought of how the country should move ahead. So very interesting. So one of the things, though, ladies and gentlemen, is this, that despite political interest and let's say intent, it did not often result in proper execution, problems of funding, problems of various other issues. So, as this book, interesting book edited by Harsh Pant, who is with the ORL, says Rise of the Indian Navy. It says until the end of Cold War, the maritime dimension did not figure. Interesting. That means they are also saying that maritime became important in national consciousness in the early 90s. And look at what it says. Yet, despite the Indian Navy's marginalization and so on, the Navy was largely successful in maintaining its presence as a credible naval force. And this is one of the most interesting stories of the Navy. I wish I could spend more time talking about it, but it is actually how, Gurcharan Das has written a book called India Grows at Night. I would argue that the Indian Navy has grown similarly. Lots of our founding fathers added, chipped here, added here, did something there, kept asking for the moment. Incremental progress happened. And slowly over a period of time, with all the little resources they had, they started and they made a big blue water navy. So that's one of the most fascinating stories. And that's what independently also Harsh Pant said. Successful in maintaining its presence at a credible naval force. And this should tell you something about how the Navy has grown over the years. This presentation is also there with Professor Sharma. So all of you who are interested in having a look at it later can have a look. There's no problem. But as I said, ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest things, biggest achievements of the Navy has been in armament. Now, realizing early on about funding constraints or whatever, the Indian Navy set up a design division, now called the Director General Naval Design, for building ships in India. And we trusted our shipyards to make them. So, from earliest experiments in 1960, ladies and gentlemen, please remember we started building. By 1997, and why am I using 1997? 50 years of Indian independence, the Tatas made the first Indian car, the Indica, in 1997. Uh, that is the year that the Indian Navy had commissioned its 75th indigenous warship, the INS Delhi. I was the commissioning crew of INS Delhi, its first communications officer. And I can't tell you how proud we were because Delhi was a marvelous design. I mean, from 1960 to 97, we kept building ships, we kept improving the design. Now, these four ships in front of you, three Delhi class and one Kolkata class, ladies and gentlemen, all built in India, in Indian shipyards, in the Mascon Dock shipyard, but shipyards elsewhere are also building wonderful ships. And they are amongst the best of their class anywhere in the world, give or take a bit up and down. So we're not merely building ships, we're building world-class ships designed by Indian scientists in uniform and defense officers, built in Indian shipyards. This is something we need to be very, very proud about. And please see this. When you are capable of building an indigenous aircraft carrier, and that's a Kolkata class next to it, then you have reached certain acme as far as shipbuilding is concerned. And to do it in 75 years is very, very remarkable considering all the sort of constraints we've had. So this is something that's been one of India's big success stories. Military operations, ladies and gentlemen, and each of these are very, very important because we have been busy. The Navy is called a silent service, it is not seen, it is beyond the horizon. But right from October of 1947 in Junagadh, and Junagadh is interesting, ladies and gentlemen, it was first kind of tri-service operation, Army Navy Air Force. But most importantly, it was the first time that the Indian Armed Forces and the Indian Navy was used under the political control of Indian masters. So that is very, very important, and I think we should flag that. 1961 Goa liberation, Navy played a very key role. Goa, Daman, Diu particularly, and we lost people in Anjati. Uh, it was unfortunate, but Navy got blooded in this. I mean, we actually guns were fired in anger for the first time in 1961. Then 65 and 71, the Indo-Pak War. 65, we were not allowed to cross the latitude of Porbandar. It was largely a defensive orientation, but we did what we had to. 71, hugely successful. I'll talk about it. Operation Pavan, Sri Lanka, Cactus in Maldives, Mafet Bolster and Shield in Somalia. Thereafter, Kargil and Parakram. More recent, Navy has been mobilized every time, whether it is Pathankot, Uri, whether it's Balakot, whether it is Galwan. Each of the times, Navy has been mobilized. It has deployed actively and aggressively to contain conflict or possibilities of conflict or to send messages or whatever. So the Navy has been active and deployed. Now, one of the things that happened in 65 war, ladies and gentlemen, was, as you know, the intelligence didn't exactly give us great insights about the Pakistani intentions. It happened in two phases, April, May, and then September. Therefore, and the Navy's tasking was somewhat defensive. Therefore, lots of people outside started criticizing the Navy and saying, what is the use of having an aircraft carrier? We couldn't do anything. The Pakistanis came and dropped some shells on Dwarka. So people said, no, kis liye rakha hai, they will go and all that. They didn't know what were the directives passed to the Navy. But be that as it may, people would normally feel discouraged, but naval officers said, come one more chance and we will show what this Navy is made of. Look at how our leaders assiduously work to build the Navy. I mean, they didn't get discouraged. They didn't get, what you would say, frustrated by what happened. There was internal, you know, bit of let's say anger about what happened, but they churned that, they used that, and look at how the Navy grew between 65 and 70, almost twice, 2.5 times in terms of assets, in terms of people. Look at what Admiral Adhar Chatterjee, our Navy chief, said in 1968 when the British announced their intention to withdraw uh, to the west of Suez. They said we no longer can stay east. It was Admiral Chatterjee who said we will eventually be in complete charge. Now, maybe the language he used was typical naval or military. He could have put it more diplomatically. But in terms of ambition, you couldn't have faulted him. And today, when Indian Navy is the preferred security partner and the first responder, you know that actually it is Chatterjee who's been proved right 50 years later. At that time, his foreign minister, his defense minister, his statement, Mrs. Gandhi stood by him. But ultimately, uh, it is Chatterjee, I would argue, who's been proved right. Ladies and gentlemen, I must give you one caveat here that everything that I say represents my opinion and my opinion alone, and not opinion of the Navy or any official agency. So what did we do in 71 war, ladies and gentlemen? What we did was absolutely entire gamut of naval operations, everything from carrier operations, submarine operations, anti-submarine operations, attack on Karachi, sinking the Pakistani submarine, the poignant loss of our own ship, the Kukri, amphibious operations, special operations. Do read a book called Operation X. We launched possibly what is one of the most ambitious and biggest special operations in East Pakistan, where about 1 lakh tons of shipping was destroyed in harbor itself. So the decisive outcome of war, which was in East Pakistan or Bangladesh, was facilitated by the Indian Navy. And one can argue that if you had more than 90,000 prisoners of war, it was largely because the Indian Navy shut off the escape route from sea. Remember that the people could have escaped only by sea, they couldn't have escaped by land or by air. And by shutting off that route by sea, we ensured that there were more than 90,000 prisoners of war. In any case, therefore, there was great recognition to the Navy. Admiral Krishnan, the one standing behind General Arora, and Admiral Krishnan himself, ladies and gentlemen, very remarkable person. He's a gallantry award winner of World War II. He outgunned the Iranian captain. He was there in Operation Peace in Junagadh with the land contingent as liaison between Army and Navy. In 61, he was commanding INS Delhi and bombarded Diu resulting in surrender of the DU 4. So very interesting person, regarded as one of the most brilliant, and he was there in 71 in Eastern Naval Command, who did all the operational planning for the war. That is how we got. And one of the greatest, I also want, in fact, I'm suggesting to you people to ask me questions. I have a stock of great quotes from Navy people. I can tell some of them. But one of these that came during war was on the 4th of December in East, there was briefly a submarine scare with the aircraft carrier group. And those ships were sent for searching the submarine. So Vikrant only had Kavaratti for company, and Kavaratti did not have a functioning sonar. And he was now the attack had to be launched on East Pakistan. Aircraft carrier was ready with his fighter planes, and all of them said, "Nahi, abhi submarine ka dar hai, let us turn around." His advisors told him, but the captain of Vikrant, Suraj Prakash, one of our greatest naval officers, said, "I did not join the Navy to come to this point and turn back without attacking. Now launch the strike." Now these are some of the great things. These are what makes you win victories. These are what makes for great characters, and navies produce some of these very great characters over a period of time. Similarly, like I said, we can argue that Navy has played a great deal of role in constabulary or policing, in providing coastal and offshore security. Our largest peace support operation in Sri Lanka of Pavan went from 1987 to 90, Tasha from 90 to 93, Swan in the aftermath of the 92 bomb blasts in Bombay, covering maritime and coastal security in the west coast. Security of exclusive economic zone. Ladies and gentlemen, our total EEZ area is about 2 million square kilometers plus. That is two-thirds of India's land area. So if you want security of EEZ, the Navy plays a big role there along with the Coast Guard. In counter piracy for operations, for example, in the Gulf of Aden, and I know that much upfront and close because I was sitting in Nairobi from 2008 to 12 when piracy was at its peak. The Indian Navy was respected and feared. Let me tell you that amongst the pirate circles was respected and feared because we escorted lots of ships. We foiled around 44, 45 pirate attacks. And at one point of time, we had about 120, 130, pirates in custody in our prisons, which was amongst the highest numbers. So we did very well. And that's what I said. You're contributing to the global good in such manner. Operation Pavan, again, I mentioned, a very interesting operation. It included everything. In fact, other than the 71, we had our Mahavir Chakra of Captain Arvind Singh in this operation. But again, it included everything from coordinating, from combat operations, from using the Elise and other aircraft to provide aviation support, logistic support. Kittu, one of their most important leaders, was captured in Ahad. I mean, it happened a little after 90, but as a part of the same operation. And most interestingly, ladies and gentlemen, very small ships like the LCUs and the STBs, which you don't fancy much using in regular operations, were used and they came out very, very well. And 3 years of prolonged peace support operation, we learned lots of important lessons. I'm telling you this, why? Particularly because the army has written half a dozen books on Pavan, and you will know a great deal of what they did there. The Navy, unfortunately, we have not gotten down to writing books about ourselves. So what we did in Pavan remains even now not known to many people, and I thought that I must bring it to fore. So these are some of the images. That's Admiral Ramdasan Center. He was a CNC of the Eastern Naval Command. All the 3 services, the tanks being loaded on the ships and so on. You can see these images. Now, consequent to our force accretion, our involvement or our support in PSO in Sri Lanka, and our operation in Maldives in 1988, in April 1989, Time magazine put India on its cover. And see what they call the currency of next military power was a ship. And this was an indigenously built ship, INS Godavari. They didn't put an aircraft carrier. They put a ship that was built in India. So there was recognition from late 80s onwards that India is growing as a military power, and a lot of it is being undergirded by the growth of the Indian Navy. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, in my first part, I would argue that the Indian Navy has both a penetrating gaze and a benevolent eye. So now that we have seen some aspects of penetrating gaze, let us see some aspects of the benevolent eye, which is our role in diplomacy and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I told you navies are very good at diplomacy, and I can elaborate on that in questions. But I would argue that it has provided strength to India's various engagement initiatives. In fact, I would argue that the thaw in Indo-US relations after the end of Cold War in the early 90s and then after the nuclear tests we were conducted has been because of the Malabar series of exercises which India and US have been at it, the joint naval exercises right from the early 90s. Some researcher can do some studies on this. Act East policy, when we say Act East or look West or something, how do you provide? I would argue, I would submit that it is the Indian Navy that provides a palpable physical connect to your Act East policy by sending ships there, by having exercises there, by having visits there. It is when you send an Indian Navy ship, which is Indian territory, flying Indian flag in different parts of the world, you are giving life, you are giving meaning, you are giving presence and potency to your international relationships and your policies. Similarly, in West Indian Ocean region, in East Africa, in Horn of Africa, it is a great deal of navies. That is why, if you see, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of joint declarations these days between political leaders of two countries almost invariably bring in maritime security or maritime relations. Whether it is a joint statement between India and Kenya or between India and US, the maritime will always be reflected in the top now. Plus, the Indian Navy itself has played roles by pioneering certain multilateral forums like the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, the Milan series of meetings, the Goa Maritime Conclave, the Admirals Cup, and several others. So, it is the Indian Navy that took the lead in creating these multilateral forums, and all of them have gained traction and strength over the last few years. Now, this aspect, ladies and gentlemen, has been there right from the earliest times. This is Panditji. I mean, he didn't make this statement then, but I put it to also reflect why we are so successful diplomatically, because we reflect the country in all its great diversity. This is a wonderful photograph. It has three prime ministers in one photograph. But this is Panditji sailing from Kochi to Indonesia in June of 1950. He sailed for 6 days, hosted President Sukarno for a banquet on the ship, and then disembarked. Is it likely that certain ideas of foreign policy, non-alignment and all happened during that journey? We don't know. But what you do know is that the ships, the Indian Navy, right from the earliest times, have been playing a very, very important role as far as diplomacy is concerned. Look at this, and I consider this a marvelous photograph. This is our ambassador in East Africa, Kenya, Appa Saheb Pan, on board the INS Delhi. Captain Karmarkar is standing behind him, and he's flanked by these two tall African leaders, which is Jomo Kenyatta and Tom Mboya, and they are Jomo Kenyatta and Tom Mboya. You can think of them as Gandhi and Nehru, or Gandhi and Netaji, or Gandhi and Ambedkar. I mean, two of the tallest leaders of the Kenyan freedom movement. Now, they were hosted by INS Delhi in 1951. What is important, ladies and gentlemen? What's important is Kenya was not independent then. She became independent in 1963. So, even though Kenya was under the British then, even though the Indian flotilla was led by a British officer, they were instructed to host Kenyatta and Tom Mboya on board the ship. He was given a guard of honor. Kenyatta stayed in the captain's cabin. So, look at what he said. He says, Captain, the last time I boarded a British cruiser, the INS Delhi was a British cruiser in its previous incarnation. It was as a part of chipping party. Chipping party is the labor party that chips the paint of the deck. Thank you for your kindness. So, I'm trying to argue that Indian Navy was helping India navigate the post-colonial landscape and make important connections with diaspora, with other people as a part of our initiatives. Whatever our foreign policy was at that time, we contributed to it. And these were, I mean, the erstwhile INS in Delhi and Mysore went all over the world. The Brahmaputra went to Canada for the first time, transatlantic voyage in 1967. So they did lots of things and they showcased India because remember, in what were the Arab, African, other nations at that time, all of them were just coming out of colonial. So to show indigenous strength, Indian strength was very, very important. Look at this exercise. I mean, we were exercising with the foreigners then, we are exercising now. Look at this joint exercise Trincomalee in 1964. The area was vast between Malaysia and Nicobar. Countries that were part were Australia, New Zealand, Britain, Canada. In fact, the other countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Malaysian Navy did not take part in it. There was a fleet era. There were two aircraft carriers, Vikrant and Victorious. So 10,000 people were taking part. What I'm trying to argue is that we giving a certain buoyancy and vigor to Indian foreign policies initiatives has always been an article of faith with the Indian Navy. I mean, its usage may have gone up and down depending on the political and diplomatic apex, but it's always been there and it's a very important vector that the Navy provides. So what are we doing today, ladies and gentlemen? We're doing all of this training in India and on site. More than 1,000 foreign trainees train in India every year with the Indian Navy. We do refits of ships. We build ships for others. We provide material assistance. We do coordinated patrols and regular exercises. We do dedicated leads and patrols for other countries. So there's so much that we're doing. We engage with them on their important national days. We provide medical assistance, search and rescue, humanitarian and disaster assistance. I mean, there is no end. We do information sharing. That is the two aircraft carriers in 1964 joint exercises. This is Prime Minister Modi dedicating a radar project to sessions in 2015. So it's a wide, continuous arc of maritime diplomacy. And one reason, ladies and gentlemen, is because our ships are disposed these days all over the world, or frequently in wide swaths of the world, or certainly in the Indian Ocean region or the Indo-Pacific region. This was just a Twitter feed, random Twitter feed that I took. When we hosted the Milan series started in the mid-90s with 5 countries. In the last edition in March 22, it had 39 countries. If you include us, 40. So there was a maritime seminar, there was city parade, and there's so many things. All of this also has several advantages, ladies and gentlemen. It provides exposure to your medium and small industries. It provides exposure to your people. The economy of the local place grows up. The cultural understanding between all the countries that come about India and India about those countries grows up. Visakhapatnam has become such a beautiful city over the last 10 years. You must go and see that. So I said, okay, that happened then. Let us look at where Indian Navy was in 15th August 22. Look at that. Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. We were there over 6 continents, 3 oceans, 6 time zones, all over. Oman, USA, Australia, Singapore, Kenya, Brazil, UK. Look at this. When you see the tricolor everywhere, when you see the INS Tarangini in London with that Tiranga, I mean, it gives you a great feeling, right? It was in that colonial entity that had ruled us for years. Today, when you send a sailing ship there, you are making a very important diplomatic point. So diplomacy is about making these points in a gentle manner, and I think the Indian Navy provides a great vector to do that. Now we also, ladies and gentlemen, have a great information fusion center, which provides global shipping information in Gurugram. State of the art, highest, one of the best, and in fact they provide regular maritime security reports. I would encourage you to subscribe to them. They are free, they are open to all. So this is the Prime Minister Narendra Modi making a reference to this and how we are providing. And this, ladies and gentlemen, we provide this information to several countries, free countries. So there's lots of uh, things that are happening in the maritime domain. Uh, One example, just last month, what all the Indian Navy was doing. You had the Australian Prime Minister visiting the ground. You had our submarines in different parts of the world. You had our first training squadron in Mauritius, and at that time they attended the humanitarian assistance situation. You had an Indian submarine in France. I told you about the retired Indian Navy officer in the toughest global race. You had our sailing vessel in Cape Town. You had the Indian Navy chiefs in the Raisina dialogue with Chief Sukhon. And all of this now, ladies and gentlemen, is becoming a part of naval life. Never before has the Indian Navy engaged with its international partners as it does now. It is both a sign of a rising India and a rising India that recognizes maritime power much more now. This is a photograph of the Australian Prime Minister being received by the Chief of our Naval Staff. Humanitarian assistance, ladies and gentlemen. Tsunami of December 2004 affected us too, but within 36 hours we had 32 ships, 10,000 tons of relief material. We reached across to not just our country, but to Sri Lanka, to Maldives, to Indonesia, giving aid. Now that continues. All of you are aware of COVID, but of Samudra Setu and Mission Sagar, in first wave, the Indian Navy evacuated Indians. And remember, this was at a time when Galwan was happening. The Navy had to be sort of, alert and ready. We were evacuating Indians. We were providing medical and food aid. And in wave two happened, we brought in oxygen. We acted as oxygen express and brought LMO and other stuff from all over the world. Look at this, my ex-ship Jalashwa, how has it been converted from being a helicopter deck to being an oxygen cylinder deck? Look at what the foreign minister of Madagascar said when Shardul went to give relief. He said, very happy to visit Shardul and meet its crew, grateful to the government and people of India for their generous donation. So see how the ship gets associated with the government, the crew gets associated with the people of India, and that is how it is. The crew represents the nation, the ship represents the state, and when they tango together, it makes for a good statement about India. So I would argue, ladies and gentlemen, with the greatest humility, that the Indian Navy is a navy that dares and a navy that cares in equal measure. Let's see last 5 or 7 minutes of my talk, and one of that concerns our leadership and leaders. Again, I have taken some examples of our heroes, but we've also had some great leaders. And what I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, is just a smattering of. And again, why I'm bringing this, many of you know army generals, you know Manek Shaw, you know Timaya, you know Karyappa, you know Sundarji, but naval heroes are not known. So I just thought I'll briefly touch upon them in this photograph. The top left, Admiral Qatari, who took over, as I said today, a great visionary, a pioneer who set the baby steps for Indian Navy to move forward. Admiral Soman, the great champion of indigenization. Admiral Chachji, great thinker, who raised the strength of the Indian Navy, an intellectual guy. Admiral Nanda, the man who bombed Karachi. Admiral Kohli, who took the initiative forward. Admiral Karsitji, the one with the long nose, pioneer hydrographer, who gave great impetus. He is India's first chief hydrographer and first hydrographer to become the Navy chief. Next to him is Admiral Pereira, considered one of the most austere, most Spartan, greatest inspirational leaders. Admiral Stan Dawson, who contributed a big way to making the Naval Academy today in Edimala and Naval Base in Karwar. What I'm trying to tell you again, ladies and gentlemen, is that these are people you've not heard of, you're not read, they are not. But I would argue that the Indian Navy's top leaders are like Homi Bhabha or Vikram Sarabhai or M.S. Swaminathan or Verghese Kurian. Just as those people are known for green revolution, white revolution, space, atomic energy, I would argue that the Indian Navy's founding fathers deserve a much bigger page in history for the way they have brought the Indian Navy up. And some of the others, and I'm just taking, like I said, very, very random examples because of shortage of time. The topmost right, Captain Mahendranath Malla, you all heard of him, Mahavir Chakra, the one who went down on INS Khupri, setting a great example to not just to the Indian Navy, but India as a whole, great example of courage and bravery. Uh, Admiral Krishnan, top left, I've told you, the CNC is. Below the bearded man, Admiral Manohar Avati, who man of many parts. I mean, a birder, a war hero of 71. But most importantly, he's the one who gave impetus to sailing, ocean sailing after retirement. Next one, the man who's cutting the cake, Admiral Mickey Roy, the founder, amongst many things, the father. He was an aviator, a Bengali who grew up in Tamil Nadu and could speak fluent Tamil. Man of many parts. I've written an article about him recently, but who can be considered the founder, the father of India's nuclear submarine program. Raja Menon, great intellectual, author, someone who put Navy, who advocated Navy's cause very cogently. This Sardar, Captain V.S. Ahluwalia, Commodore V.S. Ahluwalia, recent hero who provided the Navy its backbone of its network-centric operations. Again, all very remarkable characters and someone we need to know more. One of our biggest heroes, ladies and gentlemen, great technology hero, is Arogya Swami Paul Raj, Commodore. Please Google for him. You'll find miles and miles and miles. But let me just say it simply. If today you are using 4G and 5G in your smartphones, it is because of this gentleman. Because he is the founder of a technology called NEMO, multiple input, multiple output, which is at the heart of 4G and 5G technology. He's a professor emeritus at Stanford now, and his scientific journey began in the Indian Navy. So he retired as a Commodore. So you must say that the Indian Navy has directly contributed to making you use your 4G and 5G possible. And there are several. As I said, we have a galaxy of heroes. Mohan Rao, for example, in shipbuilding, Varghese Goenka, Daya Shankar. All these are legendary characters, and I can't tell you, I'll need probably 10 classes more, and I am ready to do that with Shiksha or Vishnudan. It is for you to take that offer, and I can talk endlessly about all of these people. This is the more recent ones, the 6 ladies who sailed round, solo circumnavigated on the Tarini and joined Tommy and Dilip Donde in the club of solo circumnavigators. So as more Navy, as more women join the Navy and go to the top, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you will have as many women achievers as you have men achievers. Some more sporting heroes, MS Kohli, the leader of India's first Everest expedition, Dinko Singh, the great boxing legend, Toor, and this one who are our shot put winners, Anas, Muhammad Anas, the 400 hurdles. The guy on top with the pistol, Omkar Singh, a special fascination or affinity for him because he began his shooting career on the ship that I commanded, Vindhyagiri. But we have produced great sportsmen too. Therefore, last couple of slides. Today's Navy, ladies and gentlemen, operates in a far more complex world. As you all know, we are all living in a complex world. You need to be networked, you need to be IT enabled. There's much greater joint operations with the Army and Air Force. There's much greater civilian outreach. And one example is that such a talk by a serving or a retired Navy officer to universities 30, 40, 50 years ago was rare. Today there is greater civilian outreach and necessary. We are no longer anonymous. Cantonment soldiering no longer happens. There's much greater interaction with foreign agencies too. So therefore, the Navy has gone on a very big trajectory as it has expanded. I would argue that we have achievements in several areas. We are world class, for example, ladies and gentlemen, in hydrography, in ocean surveying. Again, another thing I could talk a lot. We are very good in articulation of doctrines. The Indian Navy strategy and doctrine documents have been well received all over the world. We have given great impetus to maritime history through the formation of Maritime History Society, National Maritime Foundation. So it's a navy that is encouraging of scholarship. We are very good in underwater medicine, special operations, and indeed I would argue that the naval band is by far the best. So we are great in doing music too. So to sum up, ladies and gentlemen, I would argue that the Indian Navy in 75 is a spectacular success story. Of course, I put it in inverted commas so that you can challenge me and you can critique it. But I'm arguing this not as a triumphant Navy officer, but actually as someone who can be as objective as possible as a historian. We have been the principal element contributing to India's researchers. I told you that just as atomic energy or space has provided, we've been one of those elements. Our maritime canvas has moved a little slowly. The merchant marine, other arms of our maritime power have moved slowly. So we are like Sachin Tendulkar or the Virat Kohli of in the maritime canvas, and we have overcome the problems of past and poised to scale greater heights in the future. And I will end with this remarkable slide, which I use many times. This is Admiral Namba, the Navy Chief, uh, presenting on the 27th of July 2018, I think, 2017, to the Prime Minister of Tanzania, uh, a chart of the port of Tanga. Tanga, ladies and gentlemen, is in northern Tanzania, and Tanga was the site of a bloody World War One battle. It's called the Battle of Tanga. Remember that time Tanzania was with Germans, and the Britishers wanted to occupy Tanga to deny Germany the sea space. So they used the Royal Navy ships, but a lot of Indian Army soldiers. The campaign was disastrous. It is worth studying in itself, but it was disastrous. And about 300, 400 Indians died, about 1,000 got injured. It was messy. And Tanga doesn't even find a place like Ypres or Flanders or Gallipoli, which have certain romance and aura associated, even though they were losing causes. But, uh, you know, Tanga was forgotten in the pages of history, so to say. Now, when the Indian Navy chief goes more than 100 years later and he presents a chart that has been made by an Indian survey ship, you are showcasing our science and technology. This was a ship built in India, so you are showcasing our shipbuilding and excellence there. You're showcasing our surveying excellence. But more important, you are showing the new paradigm of cooperation and collaboration with countries in the region rather than the colonial construct of conquest and conflict. So he was essentially saying, ladies and gentlemen, and he chose a wonderful date. He chose 27 July, as many of us are aware. That is the date that in 1914 the World War One started. So when Admiral Lamba chose that date to present a chart 103 years later, he was showcasing a new navy of a new India. He was showcasing a completely changed paradigm in this region, in which the Indian Navy plays a very important role. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind and patient hearing. I might have taken 5-10 minutes more, but I hope it's been worth your while. These are my contact details should you decide to or want to be in touch or ask anything. I'll stop sharing so that I can see you and then we can take questions and answers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commodore Sir, for a comprehensive illustration of the 75 years of Indian Navy and the passionate Navy men that you are. You have not forgotten to pick almost all kinds of informations. And here I just want to, I am actually wondering how the independent India, especially has neglected or if negligence will not be the right word, why we have focused more on the other two arms of the our security apparatus and have a not that glamorous treatment towards the Indian Navy, because you see it is through the oceans that the colonial masters have reached different lanes. So, and as I try to understand the different aspects of the maritime history of the world, and I have also listened to three more talks in this series. So I think really it is high time that we must introduce our children, even at a school level, also the rudiments of boat building, about the sea, about the ocean. We have known more about the sky, the satellite, the land, and all these things, but very least aware of the ocean that surrounds us, and that is very surprising that India has a coastlines of 7,500 kilometers and Odisha has 450 kilometers, and we have such a long 3,000 glorious history, maritime history, and still how come we have not known as a maritime seafarer nation? And that is a very surprising thing. What do you ascribe, Commodore Saab, at least one, two reasons for this sorry state of affairs? I am very happy that we have reached to such an extent and everything is okay. But where this state of affairs?
Yes. I think you highlight a very important part. Whatever may be the reasons, like I said, the idea is not blame game, but it is very true that arguably independent India initially at least gave much more importance to the other two services than to the Navy. That's been made up, and you know it can be argued both ways. As a maritime evangelist, I always want more funds for the Navy. वो जावेद अख्तर साहब का एक पोयम है ना कि हर घर में एक कमरा कम है. So no matter how much we would want, and that is a global grip. The American Navy chief also wanted 1,000 ship Navy. But yes, you are right. We wish we had a bit more of let's say incentives, bit more support in a conceptual, intellectual way. But having said that, as has been brought out, the Indian Navy has built its force to fairly credible levels. It is the second part of your question that's very interesting, and that deals with maritime outlook, education. Like you said, when I do talk on maritime education, I show a slide of Chinese school children being taught rope work. The way they do in oceans and all, they are sent to shipyards, boat yards, boat building. I mean, Orissa has such great maritime history. Kalinga coast produced some of the greatest seafarers of our time. Now, if the people of Orissa are energized and inspired by that, and there has been no shortage of good Oriya people in the Indian Navy. In fact, Admiral S.H. Sarma, the fleet commander who led India in the 71 war, hails from Bhubaneswar. The point is how much recognition do you give to these heroes? And I'm not just talking about Orissa. This is a common failing amongst all people, all states across. So I think one of the problems is that there is genuine lack of maritime consciousness or even awareness amongst Indians at large. There is a feeling that koi kar raha hai, karne do. One of our admirals, Admiral Nadkarni, said that Indians go to the beach not to wet their feet but to eat pani puri. So we need to move. I mean, the Bali Yatra is a great metaphor for the seafaring mojo of those times. We have to revive that seafaring mojo, and to do that, you need encouragement from the common people. You need greater interest. You need the media to pitch it. I believe, it is unfair to blame them every time, but you need them to be far more interested in matters maritime. It is like there are two detached components. कि maritime world में क्या हो रहा है, वो जो terrestrial आदमी है, उसको कोई लेना देना नहीं है. Now we keep arguing कि भैया बहुत ज़्यादा लेना देना है, चाहे वो पास्ट में हो या करंट इकोनॉमी, हमारा पूरा एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी 95% of it is through the seas. If anything goes wrong there, we will run out of gas and oil. You know, so a lot of this is happening. जानने वाले जानते हैं, पर काफी लोग जो है अनजान हैं, and that is what we must, a gap that we must try to meet. And of course, initiatives like yours are very good in that. We must reach out more. We must probably not just mine, but other talks too. We could try and link it, send it, share it, get more people. And I, like I said, I'd be happy to do far more. We have done something. The Indian Navy has brought out Amar Chitra Katha series of books on India's maritime past. We collaborated with some people. Amish Tripathi and I did a series on Navy in 71 war. So there's lots happening, but this is one place where we, as we say, the Navy, we need all hands on the deck, and we need everyone to pull together for India to uh, uh, to renew its tryst with maritime destiny.
Thank you, thank you for your actually beautiful explanation. You see, where I am actually eagerly waiting for those days when our children will swim in the oceans, isn't it? Still, we watch the ocean at a distance, or at best just put our legs into the water. So this kind of actually, you are very right. We have to a most part of our life we have become terrestrial individuals. So that part, I have some thought in my mind. I will definitely share, because Indian knowledge system is reviving many ancient Indian knowledge and all these kinds of things. I will also put forth these ideas how to revive these maritime traditions, maritime history, and the Amar Chitra Katha that you see, and the kind of resources that you have mentioned. I love to send a mail to you, and those resources, if you can write, we can at least on behalf of the university, will purchase those resources, will translate them into Odia, and
You know, I think Professor Sarma's, I think the light has gone out or something like that. Can someone take over in his view? I mean, I saw suddenly it was cut. Are there any other questions or anything like that? Ladies and gentlemen, I can't see any of you. I could see only Professor Sarma, but suddenly I think uh, his internet has been cut because I just see dark. Maybe the lights, electricity supply was disturbed there. Are there any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Any other points? I'd be very keen to hear from you. Please switch on your audio and video and go ahead.
there was a connectivity problem, Commodore sir. Just for another one or two questions we will take. There was, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
yes. Yes. So any other questions from the audience? From the chat box, there are few questions, I think. I will take.
Please tell me, because I'm not able to.
Yes. Sir, recently India conducted La Perouse multilateral exercise in which frigate missiles, INS Sahadri, fleet tanker, and INS Jyoti took part in it while conducting maritime exercises. What are all the benefits and problems or difficulties faced in regards to resources?
No, see, when you do joint multilateral exercises like these, I think there is a certain commitment, and that shows that the Indian Navy size is also brought up, because Sayadri is a very advanced, state-of-the-art frigate. There was a fleet tanker. When you have a fleet tanker, it invariably means that you are sailing in farther regions of the world where you can, get fuel from the tanker rather than having to come back to the harbor. So is there a problem of resources? Not necessarily, though, of course, like I said, India, for that matter, any country would like more resources. There is no doubt about that. But I don't see any intrinsic problem in terms of resources or problems or difficulties. What are the benefits? The benefits of conducting maritime exercises are like this, particularly when you conduct multilateral maritime exercises. Go back to our history in the past. जब हम साथ में जब princes used to meet and they would have these exercises or show, or a guruji would arrange exhibition of all the prince's skills. What is happening? One is you are learning best practices of the other countries, what they are doing. You're exchanging best practices. But most importantly, you're building trust, because when you exercise together, you're showing something of yours and you're seeing something of the others. That can happen only when there is a certain trust factor amongst the partners who are exercising. So, as the level and complexity of your exercise increases, it means that there is greater depth of understanding or greater trust between the partner nations. This is very important because multilateral problems, many problems at oceans are solved through multilateral mediums. It is also a way of sending strong messages to whichever constituency you intend to send a message. I'm not getting into who you want to intend what you want to, because each exercise has a certain context to it. But when you exercise jointly, you could be sending messages of deterrence, you could be sending several other messages of partnership. What are the other benefits? You are also benchmarking yourself against the best. Suppose there are other countries better than you, you're benchmarking. Suppose you are better than them, you are showing your skills to them. These are also useful ways to build friendship, interoperability. You see, when there could be times, for example, you are handling piracy, you are handling some situation at sea of humanitarian assistance where several countries' navies need to work together. So when you try and build certain protocols in your equipment and have interoperability, you start speaking the same languages, you start having the same standard operating procedures, then you bring in greater efficiency with the way you do things at sea. So I think there are huge amount of benefits in terms of maritime exercises, and now the Navy is allocating resources for that. We are, ladies and gentlemen, as far as I know, doing joint exercises with 19 or 20 countries around the world. And every year this is increasing. Again, this is a sign of both recognition for Indian Navy stature. I mean, when someone wants to exercise you with you, or you want to exercise with them, you realize that this is good. It has mutual benefits. So I think it is also a sign of Indian Navy's greater profile in the region and around the world. But we are doing it for several reasons, and the Indian Navy is earmarking resources. Does it sort of necessitate more resources? It might in due course of time, and there are different ways to do it. You also sometimes, if you are not able to do live exercises, you do what are called tabletop exercises or conceptual exercises. So delegations from different countries come and you do thinking and all, and you say, I will earmark so many ships, so many units. You may not do that, but you do. So you are at least able to exchange your minds. You are able to have certain dialogic exchanges on certain common aspects in the maritime domain. So I think all of them are hugely useful. I think that was Mr. Naik or Ms. Naik who asked the question. So that's how I see it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Is there any more questions? Let me see. No. So anybody? I think no more questions. There is, let me go to the chat.
It's just that person. Thank you.
Okay. So I think Commodore sir will stop it here.
Yeah, I just thought I will tell about those quotes since I'll end. I thought someone will ask me that question when
Huh.
I mentioned about Suraj Prakash, and his
Uh-huh.
quote. See, there have been several very interesting quotes by Navy officers. That's what I call it. I said navies are meant to be silent services, but sometimes you need to talk the walk also. You not just walk the talk to talk the walk.
Hmm.
So there have been many very nice instances, and I thought very quickly in 2 minutes, and like in '61 Goa liberation, Admiral Katari, the Navy chief, sent a very small pithy signal to the captain of Betwa, capture me a Portuguese frigate, please. As a sign of chalo abhi shuru karo aapka kaam sort of thing. And by afternoon, the Portuguese frigate had surrendered. So, and look, there is lots of, remember that there is a lot of context. Portugal was our first colonial ruler, so to say. The ship that was destroyed was Afonso de Albuquerque, which was the first governor who established Portuguese rule. So that was Admiral Katari who said that. Then, in 71 war, I talked about Captain Swaraj Prakash. Very interesting thing happened when I think it was Admiral Madanjit Singh. He was the fleet commander just uh, during or after the Operation Enduring Freedom, when a lot of Western forces were in North Arabian Sea. So once they greeted the Indian aircraft carrier and said, "Good morning, Indian Navy. How long have you been here?" Look at the wonderful reply by the admiral. We replied to the Western power. I think it was the British or Americans. I don't remember, but the reply was, "We have been here before Jesus Christ. What about you?" I mean, it was a nice way to say कि भाई इस इलाके में हम operate कर रहे हैं, from long before. And one of the finest, and I think I'll end with this, one of the finest replies which I am inspired by is of a sailor on the Vikrant, an engine room sailor. Vikrant is having a lot of engine room problems, and Admiral Nanda visits that ship. And when he visits the ship, he goes to the engine room, boiling 50 degrees temperature. It's like a furnace. And he asks, "Kaise ho, beta? ठीक है क्या?" Nanda is also a very inspiring leader. So he doesn't say engine कैसे काम कर रहा है. He says घर से चिट्ठी आ रहा है. So the sailor replies, हाँ साहब चिट्ठी आ रहा है. He says क्या लिखी है या क्या, saying what has your wife written? And this sailor replies, he says साहब लिखी है ढाका जाओगे तो मलमल लेके आना. Now, see, this is such a wonderful statement. It highlights the morale of a sailor who is in the dungeons, so to say, the bottommost deck of an aircraft carrier, and his morale is so high. He's just saying that, he knows that Dhaka jayenge, nahi jayenge. But when the morale of a navy is so high, then it becomes very difficult to fight that kind of navy. So thank
Thank
you
you,
very much.
thank you, Commodore. Sometimes I will listen to the story of Cox's Bazar and Chittagong in the 1971 war, the exploits of the Indian
There is
Navy, the
there is
Cox's
one
Bazar
more.
and the Chittagong. Huh?
Yeah, there's one more question which has come.
Is there any question in the chat box? Uh,
See,
let me.
Vibhanshu Kumar asked me, "Can I share some challenging moments or experiences which you had?" Which you, yes, I have lot. I have lots, and it is not because of anything great about me. I guess many of my contemporaries would have shared these challenging moments or experiences, and I dare say they will inspire some youngsters at least. There have been, I mean, we were fortunate that we didn't necessarily fight a full-fledged war, though in Op Pavan in Sri Lanka, Kargil, all of that Parakram happened when we were in service. We saw a lot of them. But Vivanshu ji, you have to give me a separate full 1 hour, 1.5 hour time
Exactly,
slot
exactly,
to share
exactly.
all these experiences, and I'll be more than happy to share these
Sometimes I
experiences.
will call Kesnur ji for a physical lecture. So all your doubts and all these stories can be seen actually before your eyes.
Yes, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
there are so many brave. There are wonderful stories of bravery, of smartness, of cleverness, and most importantly, of the teamwork. I think there is, honestly, there is no greater dedicated Indian than a normal Indian soldier or an airman or a sailor. I mean, at the end of the day, they give so much of them to you and to the nation and to the mission.
Yes,
Uh,
yes,
One can
yes,
only be inspired. I will
yes,
be happy to share it some other time.
yes, yes.
Suffice it to say that they are amongst the most. It is truly a privilege and honor to lead that kind of people, and to it's very humbling. It's very humbling.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commodore Sir. So on behalf of the university and the outreach cell, we are deeply grateful to you for your kind presence and sparing your valuable time for the young students and for the officers of the university and also outsiders. So heads up to Indian Navy, and we are really proud of being the citizen of this great country, and we must do our part in propagating the maritime histories and the of our great seafaring nation and our tradition. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I have left my details in the last slide, and they are with you. People are welcome to contact me on phone, by email, by Twitter. Any one of you has more questions, observations, you're most welcome to follow me. I'll be more than happy to interact or engage with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.